Ozempic, Wegovy cases that we've been talking about. We discussed last week, well, we've talked about a number of the problems with them. And last week we were talking about the stomach paralysis side effect.
Terrifying.
Yeah, it is really terrifying. And I looked into that a little bit more. And while sometimes it is reversible with medication, other times they have to actually put feeding tubes into the small intestine. If you can't reverse it, people have to basically put all their food in blenders. And
yeah, I was going to say, so feeding tube into the intestine.
Small intestine, yeah.
Small intestine. I'm assuming that's just like you have this little barrel, and you put in food in there, and then it goes directly into the small intestine, so it doesn't have to go through the stomach, and you're
bypassing the stomach. Yeah, that, or there's also like IV nutrition. But I mean, so that it's really a horrible thing. You do not want to have stomach paralysis.
Prioritizing profits.
Dangerous drug and product cases.
Welcome, everyone. Another episode of Prioritizing Profits, Dangerous Drug and Product Cases. Another week, another show. I'm feeling good today. How are you feeling? How was this weekend?
All good. Great weekend, especially because I got to spend time with you and Christina.
Yes, it was a very eventful weekend. We did tease it a little bit on the last episode. Medieval times, massive Coliseum. There's horses. I don't even know what to call the center of that.
Like an arena?
Arena, yeah. And there's dirt, so, the horses can run around. But it's essentially like medieval times where the knights wear armors, they ride horses. The horses have the, clothing, the drapings of the colors.
The flags and the colors,
yeah. And, it's definitely probably meant for a younger crowd, but we had a blast.
It was really fun. And actually, I was just thinking jousting, but there was so much more to it. I mean, it was a full show. They had, like the horses, and there's probably a better term than tricks, but I mean, they had these amazingly trained horses that were coming out and doing different kinds of walks and bounces and steps. And, and so that was really cool. They had like a hawk.
Yeah.
That flew around, which
that was insane because
that was scary.
Yeah, he was hanging out front.
A falcon. So it was a falcon and a falconer, I guess is what they're called.
Yeah, because he was hanging out front and he had the falcon on his arm, and I thought, oh, cool, they just hired someone to bring their pet and you can take pictures with it, pet it maybe. But no, he came out in the middle of the show. He threw the bird up, no string, nothing, no leash. It's just flying around the entire arena over your head. I saw a few areas where it got really close to people. It was ducking and diving, kept coming back to the trainer, and then eventually he just threw it up and it flew into its little collar thing.
Well, and it's a bird of prey, so it's a little bit scary. I mean, here all of us are sitting there. He could have just decided he wanted to snack on us instead of whatever piece of meat the falconer was holding.
I think he probably recognized that our size difference to him, we probably weren't going to be the easiest takedown.
Well, he probably couldn't have swooped down and picked one of us up, although there were some young children there.
There were very young
Even
children.
On the late show, which I would just say I would encourage parents to take them to the early one, not the late show.
Yeah, things get very degenerate.
They pretty much did. we controlled ourselves, but it was very cool. And there was kind of like a whole story to the thing. And one of the highlights was that when you invited us to this, and I know you knew that Peter was going to be all over this.
Oh yeah, I know, because I know he loves horses, obviously, and I knew that they had. The horses are treated well, to the best of my knowledge, the way that they show it.
Pretty good life.
Yeah, they look like they do, and there's a lot of just horse training, to have that much motion and commotion, loud crowd cheering in that building. It has to require a lot of training.
Yeah, our horses would not handle that well.
Yeah, and I knew that he would appreciate that, and then also just the general kind of vibe and theme of it. I knew he would be able to kind of immerse himself in.
Yeah, well, so when we realized we were going to do this, he was like, "Oh, I wish I had like a costume or a night cape. I wonder if I could get a night cape." So, sure enough, I think that was like the week before when you were convincing us that we wanted to do this. And sure enough, we got on Amazon and found him the cape. And then he was all excited, and he was going to, he wanted to surprise you because he didn't want you to know. So after we parked, He then told you that he had left his glasses in the car. So
I didn't think anything of it, too. I knew he had 3 pairs in there. I made a comment on the way driving. I was like, damn, Pete, you got a backup for the backup over here.
Yes, he was kind of stacked up. So he snuck back to the car and then came back in. And it was really funny because, well, first of all, the cape was this big red cape, and we'll post a picture. But when we went in, you are assigned to different areas in the Coliseum based on the color of the night.
There's like teams, essentially.
Teams, yeah. So you're rooting for the blue knight or the black and white knight or the green knight or the red knight. And so I knew that Peter's cape was red, and I thought, well, it's going to be kind of awkward if we're sitting in different. So I asked them, hey, can we pick which section? Well, no, they're assigned. And I was like, well, is there any chance we could sit where the red knight sits, or, in the red knight section? And they were actually pretty accommodating. And so they did. They moved us into the red section, which was very fortuitous, too, because who won the whole thing?
The red knight.
The red knight.
It was, So, I mean, it's a whole night of competitions. And like you said, it's a whole show with story. There's a king, there's a queen. I don't know if it's a king. I think it's a queen and then her, like, right-hand man. Yeah, consort, exactly. And so the knights are, like, battling for her honor, and they have a competition. And one of it was, like, there's rings hung up, and they have to, ride the horses full speed with the, I don't know what they're, pole arms, maybe?
Yeah, it's like a pole, the jousting pole?
Jousting pole. And they got to, like, go through these tiny holes, and there's a bunch of other competitions they did. But the main one was the jousting, like the full
official
on
jousting, where you try to knock the other guy off the horse.
Yeah.
But then I didn't realize not only do you knock him off the horse, but then they start. It's combat on the foot, and it's like to the death. To the death,
exactly. If you don't kill him on the horse, then you got to kill him hand in hand combat.
Hand-to-hand combat. Yeah. No, it was pretty dramatic. And I mean, obviously it's choreographed and all, but it was really well done. I mean, I was surprised, and I thought it was very cool. And I mean, you were screaming like I don't know what. I'm amazed if you could speak the next day.
No, my voice was hurting a little bit. Well, I thought, the how to make it the most fun. It's already a fun thing, but if you're just sitting there quietly, like, you're not immersing yourself. If you think back in the olden days, you were watching
the
people
bloodlust,
die.
Screaming and yelling.
Exactly. Like the Colosseum in Rome, where there's the guy battling the tiger. Like everyone's on their fucking feet, screaming as loud as they can. And so I was trying to embody that.
Yeah, you were on your feet screaming as loud as you could. And then Christina with her flag. Wow, she was fully energized as well. And you guys were just screaming, "I love you, Red Knight!" And it was a very fun night. So we really appreciated getting to go and spend time with you guys and yell and scream and watch our night kill everybody else.
Yeah, no, it was a lot of fun, and the battle scenes were definitely pretty cool. There's some points where you can tell it's choreographed, but you can tell that they put a lot of time and a lot of effort into it, because there's definitely some very sleek movements. And even with the jousting, I mean, I could tell, how there's like the fake glasses that in shows you'll bang over someone's head and it shatters everywhere. Essentially, that's how the jousting poles were. And so they would do it into the shields, but still full speed on a horse with that polearm coming right at you, and you got to have the shield. And then they have it obviously, this guy takes this hit, this guy takes that hit. But
well, definitely, really, a lot of skill, because even if it's choreographed, I mean, you're on horses, and even well-trained horses. I mean, things can go wrong, and handily we were there in the the stands in the event that anybody needed an attorney, but
or a doctor.
That's true. We had all the bases covered.
All fronts.
Peter could save their lives, and then I can sign them up for a lawsuit.
Exactly.
It's got a tag team, the showered Ott.
But we did get lucky. Our knight won, which was very exciting. He was kind of slacking throughout the games, but he won.
I wasn't so sure we made the good choice early on.
I wasn't sure either, but he ended up winning the battle to the death, which was very exciting. And overall, it was a great night. My voice was a little rough the next day, but good time.
Good stuff, for sure. And it was just nice, too. It was well, actually not a weekend, just a day out of town for us. But we, of course, travel with the canines. So we get Airbnbs wherever we travel. And, of course, we have to get dog-friendly Airbnbs, which are very limited. And any of you out there who have Airbnbs, you should allow dogs. I swear, and they always have like an extra cleaning fee for the dogs. But I mean, we clean up so well. It's cleaner than, as clean as when we got there, generally speaking. And the only time the dogs destroyed something, on one trip, they got like the controller for the Comcast thing. Mm-hmm. But that being said, we found a Comcast in town and replaced it.
But that's the thing is I'm sure the cleaning fee includes repairs and replacements, and not everyone is as considerate as you and goes out of their way to replace those items.
Well, yeah. But I mean, and really that's the only thing. They're pretty well behaved these days. So, but it was a nice little trip up there, and the dogs got to go with us. And anyway.
Overall, good time. Good
times.
But yeah, let's get into it.
All right.
Updates on cases. What has been going on? What have we missed since the last show?
Well, we haven't missed anything because we're all ready to get it.
We're on it.
Yes, we're on it. We're on top of it for all of it. So one of the updates is the eye drops case that we've talked about. Actually, we've mentioned them a couple of times, but another lawsuit was filed. These things are still out there. There's these Ezra Care eye drops that we've talked about, and it has this horrible superbug in them. They have been recalled, but people, if they don't know about that, they may still have them in their bathrooms or cabinets. They're still using them. Mm-hmm. Horrible stuff. So another lawsuit has been filed. It's now, the problems have spread to 16 states. There have been 81 infected individuals, 14 with permanent vision loss, 4 have had eyeballs removed.
Jesus.
And 4 people have died.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, because it's this superbug. Antibiotics scoff at it.
Yeah.
Or no, it scoffs at the antibiotics. Doesn't get very far. Obviously, some people do recuperate, but really, really just dangerous stuff. And so another lawsuit was just recently filed, and this is by a woman who had to have her left eye surgically removed after this infection. And this is a case in Pennsylvania. And one of the things I just kind of wanted to toss out there because it kind of grabbed my attention. It's something that I'm familiar with, but I'm not sure everybody is. When you file one of these lawsuits, you file it against the manufacturer of the product, but you also name the seller, generally speaking. Mm-hmm. So anybody who's in the chain of distribution is ultimately named as a defendant. Sense. Yeah. So in this case, it was Amazon. Amazon did sell these things, or other ones where they've included Walmart. So there are multiple defendants. But so this is just another recent case, and just a heads up that hey, these things, check your eye drops. I mean, yeah. You might have bought these months ago, and if they're in your medicine cabinet, get rid of them immediately. Somebody uses this; it's very, very serious.
And is it something where the first use you have a chance of just immediately getting this?
Well, yeah, because it's actually tainted with the bacteria. So every drop has got some bacteria presumably in it. So yeah, you use it once. I mean, obviously, the more bacteria you put in your eye, probably the worse. But I mean, just one drop probably could do it.
Yeah, and it's so terrifying too. Anything with that eye, hearing, smelling, seeing, the senses. I mean, that stuff is terrifying, and especially when it's infections around in your head. Like that is like kind of the most vulnerable area, I would imagine. But with when it comes to distributors, how does that liability and how does that lawsuit work? Because obviously there's a lot of them, like you said, Amazon, Walmart, I'm sure Walgreens and CVS. In each case, are they taking like a percentage of the liability, or is that a separate case?
It depends, and it depends on the law in each state. Maybe can be different. Some states have strict liability, and so anybody in that chain of commerce is automatically responsible. Some states have what we call comparative fault, and that's where you have to divide 100% of fault between everybody based on their percentage of fault. But then other states will have a joint liability where everybody is on the hook. And so if one doesn't have enough money, then the other one picks it up. They're all equally responsible. So it depends on the law of the state. And so it's important, of course, to talk to an attorney to find out. But again, if you talk to an attorney, they're going to tell you, hey, these are the people, these are the defendants that we're going to list.
Yeah.
And more often than not, you're going to list everybody in that chain of distribution, and then kind of flesh it out. And some may get dismissed, depending. But say if it's a comparative fault state, there may be circumstances where, for example, a distributor should have pulled it off of the shelves sooner than they did. So there may be some actual fault as opposed to just a strict liability that they happen to, be one of the one of the people involved, one of the entities involved in this product getting from the manufacturer to the person.
Yeah, because when I imagine these settlements, I mean, let's say it's like a $10 million settlement, and with like the percentage liability where it may be like 10% with Walmart or Amazon, and then they have to pay $1 million, and then the manufacturer pays the $9 million. How does it work when you said the shared, where if one person can't pick up the bill, the other one does? I'm assuming companies don't want to be the first one paying for it.
Right. Well, and that's the joint and several liability states. And that basically you're going to collect from who you can collect from, and then they are going to have to try to collect some percentage back from the other.
Oh, I see. So it's more the big businesses.
It makes it easier. Yeah, it makes it easier for the plaintiff, though, to get paid and to get fully compensated.
Rightfully so. It's kind of like with car crashes too, where insurance companies will kind of just pay it out, and then they'll go to all the other maybe medical places or wherever it is, and other responsible parties, I guess, in the crash, and tried to collect that reimbursement.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes that happens, and then other times there are like you literally have to go to trial because each defendant is saying, I'm not at fault, it's that one, or they're more at fault.
And so with the chain of command or chain distribution
product,
I mean, how small does that go? Like the truck driver that's driving it to the store, I'm assuming he's not having to put
No, he's not. I'm sure he's not. No, it's just the actual people in the distribution chain. I mean, but although who knows, there could be a circumstance where, say, a product has to be maintained at a certain temperature and it's a refrigerated truck, and then, something goes wrong and it's not refrigerated. I mean, there probably are scenarios where the driver or the company that hires the driver could be at fault as well. So I would not say no for sure.
That makes sense.
You'll just have to figure it out.
Definitely recommend to take a look at those eye drops because that's terrifying. We'll have Fernie throw up a picture of it too.
Yeah, I mean, and I use a ton of eye drops. I get super dry eyes, which is why I can't wear contact lenses anymore. And I mean, I have eye drops in my bedside tables at both houses. I have them in my purse. I have them in my car. So, you can be sure I went and made sure that I didn't have any of those because, again, it's not the kind of thing where you have, some brand loyalty.
Yeah.
I mean, Walgreens eye drops, Walmart eye drops, whatever.
You forget some, you're going to go to the store right down the street.
Oh, and hey, these are on sale. That's cool. I mean, it's basically saline. So, it's not, it's like organic versus non-organic.
I did have some brand loyalty to Rotos. If you ever seen them, they come in. They're eye drops, and they're like
those big things.
Yeah, they're big ovals almost, like egg shape.
Yeah, I remember those, but aren't those even around anymore?
Oh yeah. They're like the more expensive eye drops compared to the usual ones, and for any like high schooler that has red eyes and they're looking to kind of cover their bases.
I was going to say, the only time that you were using eye drops a lot was back in those days. I haven't seen those around lately.
But the Rotos were known for just getting crystal clear eyes. I mean, they look fantastic, but then they also felt great. That like stinging, refreshing feeling in your eyes. I love that. And so those are the only ones that I've had brand loyalty to.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm glad you don't require them regularly anymore.
Yeah, and I'm glad they don't carry any infectious diseases.
Not that we're aware of, at least. Not that we're aware of.
Yeah, not yet, hopefully. Yeah. Well, that's a scary one. Definitely keep an eye out for that. And what other updates on cases? So
on another one, we've talked about the Tylenol litigation, and that's that using Tylenol, pregnant women. Babies have an increased risk of being born with autism and autism spectrum disorders. So those cases, as we've discussed, are being litigated. There is a multi-district litigation, and Johnson & Johnson, who is the manufacturer of Tylenol, recently filed several motions to dismiss, trying to get these to go away. And the good news is they were unsuccessful. One was on some technical issues, and then they were arguing that we couldn't prove causation correlation between the usage of the Tylenol and the children being born with autism spectrum.
And that's what most people say in general public. They're like, how can this ever have a connection? I mean, Tylenol, like you said, doctors recommend it if pregnant women have any issues or discomfort.
Or have recommended it in the past,
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and so that's exactly why, that's what the lawsuit is there for. So there are studies that indicate these links, and we've posted. In fact, I was just on the website on the page with our podcast today, looking for something, and we have all of those studies listed. I mean, there are a lot of studies, and so there is enough evidence to get this to a jury. It's not like we're just saying out of the blue it causes it can cause or increase the risk of autism. So they were trying to just say, hey, bam, there's not enough evidence, doesn't even get to go to a jury, just dismiss it, we all go home. And the judge said, no, there's enough here that it's going to go to a jury and let the jury decide. You can bring in your experts who say, no, there's not a relationship. The plaintiffs can bring in their experts and their studies, but it's not just going to get dismissed automatically. And then the other argument that they had was they were saying that they were denying Johnson & Johnson's knowledge of the risk. And again, that's a factual issue as to when Johnson & Johnson knew, and did they warn when they knew, or did they delay? Yeah. So again, it's a factual issue. You put in your facts, we put in our facts, and you've got to get into the whole discovery process to get the documents from them that would even show what they knew and what they didn't know. So just saying dismiss it. I mean, a lot of times they'll do these early on, but the good news is didn't work. The cases are moving forward. And ultimately a jury's, or probably multiple juries, because there are quite a few cases, will have the opportunity to decide if there's a link or not.
And I would assume a lot of pharmaceutical companies will go with that dismissal to try to just kind of kill it at the very beginning.
Yeah, they do. And I mean, and there's some tactical things that go along with that too, because when they file the motion to dismiss, then in response, you have to say, well, wait, no, well, here's a lot of evidence that we have. And so it's kind of a show your cards a little bit. But again, there's plenty of information here to get over that hurdle. I think it's pretty much, generally speaking, they're going to do everything they can, file these initial motions. But
that is interesting that they do it. It's a tactical thing, being able to see what the other side has, or at least a small portion of it is definitely pretty big. But it seems like a big step in this case specifically, because I know whenever I've talked to any of my friends or anyone in my group and talked about this, I mean, it's just so unbelievable to people, especially people that don't have kind of this base understanding of some of the grimy stuff that pharmaceutical companies, some of the stuff that they can do and their history, especially to the extent that it's been done. So this is absolutely insane when you tell them, but to hear that there's at least enough evidence that a judge thinks that it should go to trial, that a jury should hear it, I think is a pretty solid step in a case specifically.
Yeah, definitely. So these cases are definitely moving forward. And I mean, it's fine. I mean, it's a good process because, quite frankly, anybody can file a lawsuit for anything. I mean, it's not a good idea, and there are sanctions, and you might have to pay the costs if you file a frivolous lawsuit. But there has to be a process to weed out the cases that really shouldn't go forward and shouldn't take a lot of time and cost and all of that. So, and I don't have an objection to the process, but, sometimes, these are just like, oh, come on. I mean, this is a waste. I mean, look, there's like 40 studies or something. It's just,
it's like when the bankruptcy thing we talked about last week, where they're just trying to shoot their shot, do anything they can to get out of it. And even if they know it's unlikely, they're just trying to burn some more time.
Well, it's time, because the longer you can go without ever having to pay out on these, that's money that they keep in their coffers, and they're getting interest on, and blah, 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 and investing and whatever. But then there's also the angle of the attorneys, because when you're a defense attorney, you're billing by the hour.
Yeah.
It's not like us where we're going to get paid a percentage of what we collect for you, whether it takes us, 1,000 hours or 100 hours. They're getting paid, for everything that they do. And so, there's going to be a lot of defense attorneys who are like, oh, it's really important that we file this motion, and it's going to take us a lot of hours, and a lot of associates are going to have to research, and then we're going to have to edit it, So it's also very lucrative for them to be filing a bunch of these.
Well, and it's interesting on the side of on you guys, the personal injury attorneys, is because you guys don't get paid unless a case is is won, right?
Yeah,
Until it gets to the finish line. There's no, you guys don't bill by the hour. There's nothing along those lines. And if you lose a case, then that's just money that's lost. And so the longer that a case takes, the more resources that you have to put into it, the more time you have to put into it, is just money that you're losing.
Well, yeah, I mean, not necessarily losing, because hopefully, ultimately, you win the case. Yeah, but you risk it. And that goes to so many times people, these crazy, greedy lawyers, blah, blah, blah. Well, you know what? The lawyers are the ones who are putting up the money to get the case, hopefully, if you're an attorney who's going to survive long, you're not going to pick stupid cases. You're not going to do something crazy that's going to get dismissed, because you're going to spend your wheels, you're going to spend your money, you're going to waste your time. You're going to get nothing, and then you're also going to have an unhappy client. I mean, there's like no good can come of taking a shitty case, just to put it bluntly. I mean, so people aren't out there just filing crappy cases. You won't be in business long if you do that.
Yeah. No, that makes sense, and I think that's just a perspective people don't know or don't see if you haven't been in it at all.
Yeah. I mean, it's just it's just one of those. I don't know, just negative things that people believe about attorneys, and
it's easy
stereotype and all of this kind of stuff, but not very accurate.
Well, I know that there's definitely a lot of people that have their own suspicions about this topic, especially. So we'll throw down some more resources or a link to the website where we actually have all the studies that we've referenced in previous episodes as well. And I think this was one of the first topics that we actually discussed in the podcast.
It was. And we probably circle back to that at some point when there's some more juicy developments coming along, because it's moving forward. There will be more developments and more updates.
It's an interesting one. And I mean, it is shocking, especially when we went into some of the numbers. I think it was Puerto Rico that doesn't have Tylenol over the counter, and the autism rates are just shockingly lower. And so, when you start looking at the actual numbers and the research,
pretty convincing.
And the studies, and clearly the judge thinks so as well, to want to carry this forward.
Definitely. All right, one more update, and that is on the Ozempic, Wegovy cases that we've been talking about. We discussed last week, we've talked about a number of the problems with them, and last week we were talking about the stomach paralysis side effect.
Terrifying.
It is really terrifying, and I looked into that a little bit more, and while sometimes it is reversible with medication, other times they have to actually put feeding tubes into the small intestine. If you can't reverse it, people have to basically put all their food in blenders. And
I was going to say, so feeding tube into the intestine.
Small intestine,
small intestine. I'm assuming that's just like you have this little barrel, and you put in food in there, and then it goes directly into the small intestine, so it doesn't have to go through the stomach, and you're
bypassing the stomach. Yeah, that, or there's also like IV nutrition. But I mean, so that it's really a horrible thing. You do not want to have stomach paralysis or gastroparesis. But there have been actual cases filed. We were talking about that problem coming up, and there have been actual cases that are filed and getting litigated. And in fact, one that was filed recently was actually by a friend of mine, Paul Pinnock, who is with Morgan & Morgan, and he was actually just in Tucson a few months ago. I was able to catch up with him. Anyway, it's a very large firm, and they are pursuing these cases also. Likely a firm that we would work with as well.
Yeah. Speaking of Morgan & Morgan, funny that you mentioned them. I've been listening to a new podcast, Bad Friends. It's a comedy. It's with two comedians, Bobby Lee and Andrew something. Hilarious. Love it. But they have an ad spot where they have people that obviously paid for advertisements, and they go up there and they talk about it. And Morgan & Morgan got a spot there, and they talk about how they're like one of the biggest in the country and all this stuff, which is super interesting, just because I'd never heard or seen a law firm advertise like that.
Yeah, I think you sent me that. That was really interesting. Mm-hmm. The other and on the Morgan & Morgan topic, when we were driving back from Phoenix last weekend, we drove by a billboard, and it was this huge billboard, and it had like a Tyrannosaurus Rex on it. Have you seen this?
No.
Oh, and then it says size matters really big, and Morgan & Morgan. And I was like, I looked at it, and then I said to Peter, I was like, that is a weird ad. I'm like, okay, first of all, size matters. I mean, that was like I think that's like a saying more for people our age. I don't know if people still, I mean, obviously it's a reference
No,
to.
it's still a joke and still something people reference. And
I guess so, but I thought it felt like a little bit old schooly saying size matters. And of course, your first thing is going to be, the genitalia reference.
Cocks. Yeah, big cocks.
Well, exactly. So I thought, okay, that's a little bit weird that that a law firm is advertising that way. I mean, it is a huge firm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Big
Probably
firm.
one of the biggest. Yeah.
One of the biggest I've seen by far.
But then, okay, but now let's go. Oh my gosh. So, yeah, that got me a little bit. Anyway, the other thing about this billboard, though, that I thought was so weird is like then size matters. And then there's like this huge Tyrannosaurus Rex dinosaur. And I'm like, but like dinosaurs are freaking extinct.
Yeah.
I mean, and so it's kind of weird. I mean, there's a lot of other big things that you could use as a size matters thing as opposed to like, because I always see these other ads about, well, dinosaurs are extinct. Maybe it's because they didn't use this product or they didn't do that.
Yeah.
But why would you like actually affiliate yourself with an extinct large
Well, that's the thing. I mean, just the way that you described it, extinct and large, right? When you think of a T-Rex, your first thought is, wow, that is the biggest predator that's been on this earth.
Yeah, so maybe that's it, because it's like the meanest of the dinosaurs.
Yeah, and you want someone to fight for you like a T-Rex.
Yeah, but they've got those little baby arms.
Well, yeah, but they got big teeth. Balances out a little bit. But I think the idea is that when you think of a T-Rex, you don't think of it being small. You don't think of it being
It's
medium.
huge.
You think of it huge. And so that's why if they're referencing size, they want something that as soon as you see it, your brain automatically, thinks, okay, big predator, big, animal.
I guess so. I mean, yeah, I get it from that perspective. So it's the biggest, meanest, nastiest of the dinosaurs.
Yeah.
So maybe they're the biggest, nastiest of the law firms. But again, it still seems like, I don't know, have some huge lion or I don't know, some animal that's still alive. But,
yeah, but a lion, you'd be like, oh, little kitty cat.
no, but you have this big raging lion. I don't know.
Yeah, little kitty cat.
Well, maybe it's working, and I'm not exactly the marketing expert, so whatever. It was just literally we were driving along, and I was like, "Wow, right in your face, size matters."
Yeah.
Dinosaur, Morgan & Morgan.
And look at you now. You're talking about it. You're thinking about it. And I'm sure you still thought about it even before this podcast, right? You're like, wow, that was kind of an interesting ad. And that's good advertisement right there.
There you go. And they're getting more free advertising because we're discussing it. And we were discussing it in conjunction with them filing the gastroparesis lawsuits over the Ozempic. So,
speaking of Ozempic, yeah. So another lawsuit was filed for Ozempic and the stomach paralysis. And are we expecting there to be an increase on this? Because, we discussed, the stomach paralysis wasn't something that at least the general public was aware of. We didn't know that this was a risk until it started coming up with more and more people using it. And now that it's been identified as an issue connected to this, something that people are now going to be looking out for with users of Ozempic, it's going to make sense if more start coming up.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't think that the usage is slowing down. And I think the more that people hear about it and it's a quick fix for losing weight, I think people are going to keep doing it. So, we're going to see more of the gallbladder cases. We're going to see these cases. And then who knows what's next?
Yeah.
I mean, we could probably just weekly update on what the new Ozempic side effect
The new side effect, yeah. And I mean, that's terrifying. We joke about it, but how crazy is it is that there's a drug and already that the risks are up there. They can get really bad. But the fact that, on a week-to-week basis, at least a month-to-month basis, there's a good chance that there's going to be a bigger and badder side effect coming out.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll on see. It.
And then tune in because we'll keep you updated.
That's our job.
That is our job.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good update on cases. That's a lot of stuff that's been going over, and I always like it too. Like especially with the Tylenol, is that there's some of these cases that we talked about in the past, and obviously they're going for a long period of time. We're always taking in new cases for him. Hernia mesh, that's been going on for years and years,
like 5 or 6, I think.
But these little updates kind of remind you that they are still ongoing. That there's always new stuff coming up, and there's still thousands of people either suffering victims or thousands of people working to represent these victims.
Yeah.
But we can go on to cases that we're handling. Right?
Okay. Well, so what we're talking about this week as far as kind of categories of cases are dram shop cases.
Dram shop.
Dram shop.
I usually have a general idea of what the case is about just off the name. No clue on this one.
Peter didn't either. He was like, hey, what are you guys talking about? And I said, dram shop cases. He was like, what the heck is that?
I don't feel as bad now. if the cardiologist doesn't know, then I shouldn't feel bad about not knowing either.
Yeah, so dram shop cases, and a lot of these cases, like the term bellwether and all of these terms, they come from Old English. And so a dram shop case is a case involving a bar or somebody who serves alcohol. And so or cases where there's liability on the provider of the alcohol for injuries that somebody sustained.
Yeah.
So a lot of times, you'll have a drunk driving accident, and of course you're going to file a lawsuit against the driver of the vehicle, but you can also potentially file a lawsuit against, say, a bar if the person was drinking at the bar, they were overserved, that sort of thing. And so the dram shop, I actually had to look up what dram was. I mean, I knew dram shop meant, somebody who sells alcohol, basically a bar. But a dram is like a measurement, a unit of liquid, and it's a very small, it's like smaller than a shot. And so basically, I guess back in those days, they had, you went into a bar for like a dram.
Yeah, it's like
a sip.
If it was before work, you wouldn't get a shot, you get a dram shot.
The dram, yeah. Anyway, so but ultimately it means any establishment that sells alcohol.
Yeah.
And so these cases, and a lot of times there's, cases involving drunk driving have horrendous injuries, and the person may have a minimal insurance policy. And so you're looking, is there somebody else responsible?
Yeah.
And, alcohol is obviously regulated, and, you have to have a liquor license to serve alcohol. And along with having that license and being able to make, a lot of money, I mean, it's a very profitable business, then there also come responsibilities. And you have to, abide by the rules and the laws with regard to service of alcohol and not not behave in a negligent manner. So that's what dram shop cases are, and I've actually been involved in a number of them over the years, and there's there's just every time you look at the newspaper, there's some crazy situation.
And I'm pretty sure you've mentioned in the past, and I don't want to get too off topic here, but people, like you said, when there's a drunk driving accident and maybe the driver or the insurance company doesn't have the funds to actually fully reimburse the victims or the victim's family, whatever it may be, they go over the dram shops as well as possibly the alcohol themselves, like Jack Daniels. Is that something that happens, or is that something that's been attempted?
Yeah, not really so much the actual alcohol itself.
Yeah. I wouldn't really assume that has much legs to it, but
no, there's warnings all over. But I mean, that's interesting too, because over the years, the warnings that have been required to be placed on alcoholic beverages have changed. I mean, now there's all kinds of warnings about not to drink when you're pregnant and other warnings. So at this point, I think that the dangers from the manufacturer of the spirits are pretty clear.
Yeah.
Now, if there was some kind of crazy, manufacturing error, and it was, I don't know, it was much stronger than it.
Moonshine. Well, that's the thing.
But, moonshine, is moonshine. I mean,
Sure,
and they are required to label and to indicate the percentage of alcohol.
Yeah.
So they're going to be fairly well insulated. But then, the person who's selling it, they're, more likely. I mean, you see these situations all the time, where people are giving shot after shot after shot. I mean, no good can come of that.
Well, and didn't you mention last show how there's a maximum that all, restaurants or bars are allowed to serve their
Well, I don't know that there's actually, and again, the laws are going to vary state by state, but I don't know that there's a maximum, but I mean, you can't overserve someone. And so part of like the training process is looking for signs and symptoms of intoxication.
Yeah.
And also, because of course, everybody's going to be slightly different. And, a 90-pound woman versus a 300-pound man, that's, you can serve them different amounts of alcohol before their BAC goes to the same levels.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of issues about that. I mean, and in these cases where you're trying to figure out, what somebody, how drunk somebody was when they were at the restaurant. You have to factor it. I mean, we have experts do that, toxicologists and, and alcohol service experts, because, had they eaten food? Were they drinking water? How much? I mean, so many things play into how it affects you. So it's very hard to, to really pin that down sometimes.
And even at Scottsdale, like Old Town, when I go out with a group of my friends, and obviously, there's a ton of drinking. There's people buying bottles at tables. There's shots everywhere. Things can get pretty crazy. But I've definitely had a few of my buddies that just take it a little too far. And I know last time they went to a bar, and it was like the third or fourth one that we had gone to, and they went to go order a drink, and the bartender like shook her head like, "Oh, okay, I'll be right back," and she went and just brought back a cup of water.
Wow.
Nothing else. And I think it's just because there's some people that you can, I mean, in general, right? There's just people that you can visibly tell when they've had a lot to drink. They just either don't hold their liquor as much, or when they are drunk, they are just, much louder, a little bit more messy, or whatever it may be. But then there's also like the quiet ones. I've had buddies that drink and they can be drunk as hell, but when they get really drunk, they just sit there and don't talk at all.
Yeah. And that's hard to say. Are they just, and especially for somebody who doesn't know them, say a server or a bartender, is this just a quiet guy, or is he just wasted?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it is tough. And as you mentioned, from going to bar, a lot of times that's a question too. I was involved in a case a number of years ago, which is really, it was an intense case for me, actually. It was a woman who was about my age at the time, and I was probably, mid to late 30s. And she had been celebrating with some friends, graduating from a course. It was like it was advertising, a kind of art course. I don't remember exactly the details, because obviously that was a while ago. Anyway, so she was all happy. She went to this bar with her friends. They were drinking wine. Again, it wasn't like some of these cases, I would envision. I could never picture myself in that circumstance, but in this circumstance, I was like, oh, and she went to 3 different restaurants.
Yeah.
And they were restaurants I had been to. And I was wow. I've been to that restaurant. I've drank wine at that restaurant.
Close to home.
It was a little bit close to home, and we had to take her deposition, and she was in prison, and we went to prison to depose her. And she was just like this. She just reminded me of me. It was like, holy crap. You always think there's no way I'm never going to commit a crime. And then you're like, well, back in the day when I was drinking, again, not an intentional situation, but could that have happened to me? That could have happened to me. And so that really terrified me. And at the time, it was kind of a wake-up call also that, you think after 1 or 2 drinks, you're okay.
Yeah.
But again, you don't know. And you really want to risk it, because what happened in that case was that she had left the final bar, and she was driving, and she dropped her purse on the she hit her brakes or something, and her purse was on the passenger seat, fell on the floor, and she leaned down and picked it up, and when she came back up, she crossed the center line, head-on collision, and killed a guy.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And basically her life as she knew it was over. And here she was celebrating, this great event, this graduation, moving on to a new stage of her life. And now her new stage of life is in prison.
Yeah.
So.
And it's so crazy with things like that, because when I got in my car crash months and months ago, it was something, when you imagine these massive life events like this, you imagine it as something that's, something so big like that takes a lot of time. Something that is, you see it coming, or even if you don't see it coming, it's this thing. But when I got in my car crash, it was like, 5 seconds.
Snap your fingers.
Snap your fingers, it happens, and then all of a sudden you're in the aftermath.
Yeah.
And everything else after that is aftermath, you're dealing with it. And so a case like that where, she's driving back, she's celebrating a big event, she's happy, and then, within a span of just 2-3 seconds, boom, this thing happens. And then the rest of her life is changed, and everything after that, every day after that is recovering or coming back from that. Right.
Well, and we're just talking about her, but then also she killed somebody.
Yeah, that's
and so that person's family is devastated. In fact, there was when I was thinking about the dram shop cases, one of the cases that kind of came to mind, and I just was looking at that today, is there was a case in South Carolina. I think it was at the end of April, maybe. I don't know if you saw this in the news, but it was this bride. She'd just been married, and she and her husband and 2 other people were on a golf cart actually leaving the reception, and a drunk driver hit the golf cart and killed her.
Yeah, golf carts. There's zero protection. Most times there's not even seat belts that work there. I mean, that's.
But I mean, literally, I mean, and so, you know, and it was just so sad. I'm getting chills, like, talking about this. You know, everybody was saying it was the best day of her life. She didn't want the night to end. And then bam, you know, a few minutes later, literally her life has ended.
Yeah.
You know, her husband was severely injured, did survive. The other two people were less injured. And the person, it was a young woman, I think 25 years old, who was the driver in that case. And I mean, her life, and she was like 3 times the legal limit. Yeah, I mean, you know, one moment, and here she is now, you know, in prison. And I don't think that she's actually been sentenced or there's been a trial. I know she pled not guilty. So this is very recent, but a lawsuit has been filed in that case, and there were a couple of bars. Apparently, she was bar hopping, and so, you know, and again, you're going to name each of the bars that she was at, and you know, the ones closer in time, the last ones are probably going to have the higher liability because, you know, she already came in somewhat drunk. But again, they're going to argue, well, we didn't know she'd been anyplace else. We thought this was her first drink. So there's, you know, it's really complicated. You know, what percentage each one of these might have, and in that case too, I just saw that there potentially are claims against, well, in the lawsuit they named her place of employment because it had been a group of coworkers who had gone out, and there was some allegation that they were pressuring her to do shots with them and to drink a lot. And so you know, there's multiple places that there, you know, there may be. I mean, of course, whatever insurance she had is going to pay out whatever the policy is. But again, I mean, you have you know, this young woman on the brink of, you know, her new life, dying. It's the, you know, and her surviving husband. I mean, it's just devastating. Her entire family is completely devastated. So, you know, you're going to look at the bars and really any other angles there.
And it's crazy. I mean, it really puts it into perspective because when you hear of these drunk driving accidents and especially when people dying, you think of it as the driver and the other driver, or, you know, whatever the instance may be, you know, essentially 2 parties. But when you put it in this perspective, there's a lot of parties involved. You know, the bar hopping, I mean, 3-4 bars right there. The fact that the coworkers and the place of employment is also being incorporated here. And there's just so many factors that are coming together to make this, you know, obviously awful event happen. And so with these dram shop cases, I know they're cases that we're handling. Is this something that if you have been in an accident and a drunk driver struck you or something along those lines, then you should reach out to an attorney? I mean, obviously, those cases generally you do. But.
Well, definitely, because, you know, and what may happen too, and, you know, I've had people say this to me. They're like, well, you know, this drunk driver hit me and the insurance company called me right up and they said, you know, we have a $100,000 policy. We're tendering it. We're giving you everything. So I don't really need a lawyer, do I? Well, if they're giving you $100,000 without any questions asked, then obviously your case is worth more than $100,000, because if they could fight and argue that it was worth less, they would. So basically, you probably have, you know, more severe, you know, your case is worth more than that. So then the question is, where, you know, are there other avenues to look at? Do you even know, was the person drinking at a bar? Because a lot of times, you know, and especially if there's a fatality or serious injuries, it takes a long time to get that police report, and you may not necessarily know. But I mean, you want to talk to an attorney who can get that information for you and help you figure out, were they drinking there? Were they, you know, drinking at somebody else's home? I mean, there's some states have social host liability. In Arizona, we do not, unless you serve a minor. But if it was a minor who was served, then you potentially have social host liability against the homeowner. You know, and if the person was in a bar, and you know, I've had cases against actually a bar in town. There's one one restaurant chain in town that has had a lot of litigation, and I've had several cases against them. But one of the really most horrendous ones was a situation where a guy was underage, was like 19 years old, and they were serving him all these shots. He leaves, gets in his car, and kills somebody. Kills this woman who was like going home from the grocery store.
What restaurant is this?
Well, I'm not going to mention it.
Well, we can bleep it out. I just want to know. I'm curious.
I'll just...
Okay.
There's less of them now than there used to be. But
oh my God, yeah, wow, that is a chain place.
Yeah. And so, in fact, I had another. I mean, it was just the craziest thing for a while there. There was a period of like 3 or 4 years, and I kept thinking like, oh, seriously, another dram shop case against them, and it's interesting because there are fewer than there used to be here in Tucson. But I had another case against them that was just this really outrageous situation where it was like during the day or like early or mid-afternoon, and this couple was in there, and they were just drinking pitcher after pitcher of beer, which, again, that's somewhat problematic when you're serving these big pitcher after pitcher of beer. And they get drunk, and she gets pissed off. And I guess she was, like, arguing about them playing some music she wanted to hear. And then they still keep, she's being obnoxious. They still keep serving her. And then she and the boyfriend get into a big fight. Yeah,
this was actually going to be one of my questions, is that obviously you assume that it's going to be drunk driving, but, like, domestic abuse, where you hear there's always a ton of... Is this not where I was going?
Well, no. Actually, I mean, but that is an interesting angle, and I don't actually know the answer to that. But that'd be an interesting thing to look into. But in this situation, they got mad, and they started this fight. And I guess they decided that she was the more obnoxious one, so they told her she had to leave, and they didn't offer her a cab. They didn't do anything. She wasn't driving. The boyfriend was driving, so she walks out the front door of the bar, and then she walks into the road, and she gets hit by a car and killed.
Jeez.
I mean,
and so they're held responsible for that too?
Well, yeah. I mean, you overserve somebody and then you eject them.
Yeah, I get
it. And they had a responsibility to offer to call a cab, or they didn't even know if she was driving. I mean, I'm assuming they didn't know if she was driving or not. So if they kicked her out and she got in the car.
Anything that they should have, taken action.
Yeah. So that was nasty. And she had a number, I think she had like 4 or 5 children. And we did resolve that case. And in fact, I think the last of the children has turned 18 now, because in those situations we get settlements for each child, but they don't collect the funds until they're 18. And so I would be notified and, that sort of thing. And they would be invested. So anyway, but yeah, I mean, it's just there's a lot of different ways it can come about.
And so for these cases, I know you mentioned essentially the idea is alcohol providers. What about convenience stores, gas stations?
Yeah.
Is it the same thing? Because, I mean, let's say you buy, a case of beer. There's a law against, cracking a brew open in the car. And so if you're 100% sober buying this, then I'm assuming there isn't any liability on these places. But if you come in and you're already drunk and then you buy alcohol, that's
if you're already drunk. So again, they are not allowed to sell you alcohol if you're drunk, and sometimes it's pretty darn obvious. In fact, I had another case years ago. There's a bunch of these over the years, and it was a really insane situation. And it was like, I swear, if you're in a relationship, just don't drink because you're going to get in fights. Anyway, again, it's like this couple in a bar, and they're drinking and they're just getting wasted, and so the woman decides she's pissed off. She's going to leave. She goes out. She gets in her car, and it's at this bar where people are parallel parked. And so she gets in her car, and there's a car in front and a car in the back. Well, she's wasted, so she's just slamming the car in front, slamming the car in back.
Like in a movie.
Exactly, like in a movie. And so... And so somebody came and complained, and so the bartender's all like, you need to drive her. So the guy who's sitting on the bar stool drinking as well goes and gets in the car and somehow manages to maneuver it out of the parking space. And then they go and they stop at like a Circle K and they buy more alcohol.
Wow.
And then they're drinking it in the car, and they end up having a horrendous accident, hit another vehicle, and then the car rolls, and the guy actually, his arm was amputated. It was like in the rollover. It was just a really horrible, nasty situation, and the woman died. And it was a big mess trying to figure out, what exactly happened, accident reconstructionists and all of that. But yeah, I mean, in that case, the convenience store and the bar both were sued.
Were held responsible. And so these cases typically take place when the settlement is going to be more than what the insurance company can provide. And so then you have to look for other places. Or let's say the insurance company, if there's $100,000 max and they're only willing to offer $50,000, is there still a reason to go after these other
Well, no. So for example, I mean, it just wouldn't be economically feasible to do that. So suppose that somebody hits you and they're drunk, but you have a sore back for a couple of weeks and you're fine.
Yeah.
And so their insurance company is going to have enough money to compensate you for your damages and your pain and suffering and all of that. And to sue the bar would just cost a lot of money, take a lot of time, and you've been fully compensated.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't make sense to do that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think that's something people don't really think about. Like I said, I think it just puts all of this in perspective about how many different parties can be involved in these terrible accidents. And I mean, I've had some tough nights when I'm drinking. I wake up and I'm like, oh, I got in this argument, or like, oh, my head really hurts, or I tripped and fell and I got scratches on me, something like that. The classic ones. But I can't even imagine these situations where, like, the guy you said amputated his arm. I mean,
it's terrible.
You black out and then you come to the next day and you're missing.
Or you're in a hospital and you don't know what happened, and you find out you killed somebody. I mean, that's it would be the end of your life. It's just it certainly as you know it.
Something you don't even remember too. I mean, that's like. It's just insane, indescribable.
Well, and I mean, it's one of the best things I think about Ubers is the fact that they're so available because back in the day, I mean, calling a cab was kind of a big ordeal.
Oh, I know, yeah.
I mean, it was not necessarily an easy thing to do, and bars would call them, and they would, and there just weren't as many, so they'd be like, well, there are no cabs available, so that was, and call a friend, blah blah blah. I mean, it's just it's.
And depending where you're at too, because I mean, in high school, like before Uber was around and I didn't have a car, and you needed to get to a friend's place, and if the parents weren't available or something, I would start taxiing around. Like it was just much easier. But even in Tucson, like there just weren't that many taxis available, or if there were, it'd be like, oh yeah, we'll be there in 30, 45 minutes.
Right,
it's
and
like,
people
Jesus
are not
Christ,
very impatient.
If you're at a bar, if you're at a restaurant, you just finish eating, waiting that long can be a lot, and especially in the heat. So in New York, it's so crazy when I go to bigger cities too, because taxis, it's just an everyday life. There's everywhere, you need them, everyone uses them, and then places like here, the majority of days you can drive all across Tucson and not see a single taxi.
Yeah. Well, and even in cities like, for example, in New York, I mean, I lived there for 3 years. If it's raining, you can't get a cab. Everybody's trying to get cabs, right? And so, but I mean, with an Uber, there's a designated driver that's coming for you. You're not out there just hailing and hoping they're going to pull over for you. Mm-hmm. I mean, you have a car ordered that's going to be there, in 6 minutes or whatever. So it's great, and hopefully people are using them and not drinking and driving.
Mm. So it seems like obviously it's always a good idea if you're in any car crash to contact an attorney, but especially if there's alcohol involved, because even if the insurance company is offering you the max, and if they are just off the rip, then that probably means, like you said, that
your case is worth more.
Yeah.
I mean, again, and the reality, so for example, if somebody does come in and say, hey, this insurance company is offering me the max, I mean, no decent attorney is going to take a fee on that if you've been offered that. No way. Yeah. I mean, you're going to get that, but the attorney is then going to look for, are there other avenues where we can collect additional funds for you? Mm-hmm. I mean, and the fee would only be on that additional.
Yeah, I actually completely forgot that there was a case at Pincus where it was kind of like what you're talking about, where they went to like 5 or 6 bars and then went in this terrible accident. Yeah. And it was one of the biggest cases that they had settlement-wise, because they obviously got the max from the insurance, and then they were going to each individual bar and going into litigation and doing depositions for each individual one because of just the severity of the case.
Yeah.
Well, we are kind of coming to the hour here, so I want to make sure that we get through everything. Is there any areas specifically that you want to touch on?
We do. Well, actually, we did have a question. Maybe we can pop onto that. We've got a few minutes here. And the question was how much it costs to file a lawsuit. And so we actually touched on this a little bit earlier, too. But the way that plaintiffs or that personal injury attorneys work is that we work on a contingency basis. So a lot of people, it feels like everybody understands this at this point, but some people don't. don't. I mean, we still get calls sometimes saying, how much does it cost to come in and talk to you? And I mean, almost every attorney I know is going to give a free consultation and meet with you to determine if you have a case. And if you do have the case and they're willing to take the case, they're going to advance all of the costs, basically front the costs, put, whatever it costs to file the lawsuit, do the discovery, all of that. And you don't have to pay anything. We get paid a percentage of what we recover for you at the end of the case.
Yeah.
So again, there's no risk on you. It's all of the risk is on the attorney. And as we were saying earlier, the attorneys aren't going to take a really crappy case because 33 and a third of zero is still zero.
It's a good incentivization for the attorneys. But with the way that this is worded, it makes me think that, is there filing a lawsuit? Like, this is something that I think everyone, right? You sue someone, I'm going to sue you, something that's thrown around. But me personally, I don't know how that goes. Like, what, you write up a complaint and then you send it in the mail, you send someone an email. Is there any cost to actually filing this lawsuit towards someone?
Well, there are. And so in general, again, it's going to depend on what court you're filing it in and what state you're in, but it's usually several $100s. And so that's actually the filing fee. Mm-hmm. And then you have to serve the complaint on the defendant. And you will oftentimes have a process server. There are some cases where you can serve by mail. And so any of these costs, again, they're costs that the attorney is going to pay, and you would then pay back out of any settlement. Mm-hmm. And I always talk because people are saying, well, what if the costs are hundreds of thousands of dollars? And so I always, when I meet with somebody initially, talk to them about what I think would be the case. Some cases settle without even filing a lawsuit.
Wow.
Because in most cases, you have until the statute of limitations to file it. And so for a car accident here in Arizona, it'd be like 2 years. There are some times where we're able to settle a case within that first year and a half, and you don't have to file the lawsuit. So you don't have that expense. So we're not going to incur expenses that we don't have to. And some people say, oh, why aren't you filing? I'm saying, well, I'm not filing because, it's $400 and some dollars. And if we don't need to, then that's $400 and some more dollars that you get.
Yeah.
So there are, so that would be a cost ultimately but what I was saying is when I meet with somebody, I say, look, if we don't litigate, the costs are probably going to be, whatever I estimate they're going to be, maybe sometimes under $1,000. Mm-hmm. If we need to if we need to file a lawsuit, there's going to be the filing fee. There will be deposition. And if we take a deposition, that's going to cost money. If we have to hire an expert, then it's going to get into some serious money. If it's a medical malpractice case, for example, you're going to have to hire an expert witness physician, and they charge thousands of dollars to give you their opinion and then testify. So, and again, any of these circumstances, we're looking at and consulting with the client and saying, we're going to have to spend this much money, but again, it has to make sense. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you're going to say a medical malpractice case where you figure we're going to probably put out $50,000, then you need to have injuries that are worth more than that. If you have, $10,000 worth of injuries, more often than not, an attorney's going to say, to get you to a trial to collect that's going to cost more than we can get for you. Sometimes there's just economic realities that might not be the best route to go.
That's what I was going to say, is that for it to get to the point where you have these high costs, where you're hiring expert witnesses, where you're spending thousands of dollars in these different areas, it has to be a case that's worth it.
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, one positive that's come out of the pandemic is that now, I mean, back in the day, I was like, I'd have to fly all over the country taking depositions.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, these days, most people are doing these depositions over Zoom. Yeah. And so it's saving a lot of out-of-pocket expenses. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, some, in these mass tort cases that we're talking about, those bellwether trials, I mean, $500,000. Yeah, it's a lot of money to get those cases to trial. But the good thing for you as a plaintiff is that that's not money out of your pocket. It's money that's going to get advanced by the law firm if the law firm believes that your case is a valid case and that we can collect money for you and that it makes sense to spend that money because what you're going to collect is significantly more.
And I think that's so massive. I mean, for people I've been growing up around this, so this is kind of knowledge that I've known, that there aren't costs that the plaintiff have to take on, right away. Obviously, nothing's coming out of their pocket. But I can understand it being a massive fear, right? You have these damages, it's going to be something big, and it's scary if you think that you have to spend all this money and put yourself in a difficult position for months, years at a time until you get this payout. And the way that it's structured now is that no matter what economic standing you're in, situation that you're in, you could still pursue these cases, because whatever the damages is, whatever the situation is, your financial situation shouldn't have an effect on that.
Yeah. I mean, and that's really what, and this goes back a long way, but when personal injury attorneys first started advertising, there was a whole lawsuit about whether or not attorneys were allowed to advertise, but it was First Amendment. Anyway, obviously we are. But there was a big issue that people had no idea that they could get an attorney. Yeah. And still even to this day, and what it did really was it opened, it made the courts accessible to the average person. Exactly. Because the average person doesn't have, several $100s just to do an initial consultation. And so when attorneys could advertise and could let people know that consultations were free and they didn't have to advance costs and all of that, then there was a surge in people pursuing cases. And some people think that's a bad thing, but the reality is that these are people who were hurt and who were out of pocket, medical expenses, loss of earnings, whatever, and they were entitled to be compensated, but they just didn't know how to do that, or that they could do that. And it's sad that even today, we still get that question fairly often: how much does it cost to come in and talk to you? And it doesn't cost anything to come in and talk to us. And although most people want to Zoom anyway, they don't even want to come in. Either way, it's free.
Yeah, I think that's a good question though, because like you said, there's still people to this day that don't know that there's free consultation, and if you think you have a case, I'm assuming all, if not at least a majority of attorneys are going to be willing to hear you out and hear if there's a case there free of charge. But also, I didn't know that there were actually costs associated with actually filing a lawsuit. It makes sense completely.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah, and in fact, so look, with these mass tort cases too, each lawsuit has a filing fee, and so sometimes if you have, some of these firms have 10,000 cases. Yeah. That's a lot of money that you have. And even, I didn't have 10,000 cases, but I might have, some of these litigations where I had 100 cases. And you're paying, $450 per. That's a lot of money that you're carrying for a period of time. Straight
out of pocket. And that's if, obviously, hopefully, if it's getting to that point, that the case is going to work out and you're going to get return on investment there, but that's still a massive risk that you're holding on to for years at a time.
Yep. Sometimes. Yes. Oh, the life of a personal injury attorney.
Well,
there's good, there's bad, there's pain, there's blood, sweat, and tears. All right,
roller
I'm getting
coaster.
Dramatic. I'm getting a little dramatic on you towards the end here.
That was a good question, though, and highly, just push people to throw us questions wherever, wherever you're listening to us. We keep an eye on everything, and if it's something a little bit more personal, feel free to reach out to us on email, podcast@showeredlaw.com, and we check that continuously. Something I noticed as well is that some people have been commenting some personal stories that they've been having with some of the cases that we've been discussing, which is, it's really good to see. I think it's awesome to hear, and not awesome to hear, obviously it's a terrible thing, but it's great to see that some of these situations and these conditions and terrible events that are happening to people and that we're discussing, people are hearing about them, and maybe they didn't know the severity of it, or they didn't know why these things were happening. And it's great to hear that they're able to find out about it or get more information, and also just have somewhere to share it.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, because I've seen a fair number of people who, and especially with the hernia mesh cases, it seems like people are kind of saying, oh, well, this happened to me or that happened to me, through social media channels. Yeah. And it's just, social media has been around for a long time, but it's just interesting that that people are so comfortable reaching out that way. Back in the day, it was all phone calls and phone books, and then finally websites. But if that's the way that you're comfortable reaching out, we do absolutely respond to those. Happy to help you. And a lot of times, it's just how do I find out? And we can get the medical records for you.
Yeah.
Help you figure it out. So so keep reaching out however you choose to do so.
And we're always here to answer any questions, and you can also, obviously call Shard Law Firm. But if there's some good questions that you have even about your case specifically that might play to others and you want us to discuss them on here, we're happy to do that as well. I think people probably don't think that, or most people probably think that they're 1 in a million. But little do they know that some of these situations, some of these, problems with these products are happening a lot more than you would guess. And some of the questions and concerns that you're having is a lot more widespread than you'd assume.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be something that we've talked about too. I mean, we get people saying, "Hey, I took this medication. Is there a problem with that?"
Yeah.
So anyway, I guess on and on we go. We just can't shut up.
I think we're going to close out the show today. Good show overall. I think we covered a lot of good topics. I hope everyone enjoyed listening to us chit chat. I mean, it's always a good time. Every week we'll be back same time next week.
Absolutely.
If you enjoyed it, definitely throw us a follow, subscribe, like whatever it is, TikTok,
Tell your
YouTube,
friends.
Facebook, tell your friends, throw an email
Share an
out.
episode.
You have any questions?
Give us a review.
All of it, 5 stars, everything. You have any?
So far, we are 5 stars.
So far we're doing pretty well. If you have any questions, like we said, feel free to reach out. But other than that, look forward to this time every week, and glad that everyone's hanging out with us, and hope you have an amazing week.
Yes, have a good one.
Prioritizing profits.
Dangerous drug and product cases.